Have you ever walked into a place where you should have been welcomed, yet felt like you didn't belong? Imagine booking the finest room in a five-star hotel, only to be treated as a fraud the moment you arrive. Your ID ignored, your credit card confiscated, your very presence questioned. That's exactly what happened to Anthony Walker, a 45-year-old black CEO who built a hospitality empire of 68 hotels across America. On one ordinary evening in New York City, dressed in jeans and a polo, he walked into Crown Imperial Hotel, his own property. In just 12 minutes, the staff profiled him, humiliated him, and tried to throw him out. But here's the choice that changes everything. Do you walk away quietly, or do you stand your ground and expose the truth? Now pause for a moment. If it were you, how would you respond? Would you swallow the pain in silence, or would you fight for dignity? Not just for yourself, but for everyone who ever felt unseen. Stay with me, because what happened next shook an entire industry. If you believe dignity matters, hit like, share this story, and subscribe to the channel. Let's step into the lobby together. Anthony Walker had always believed that true leadership required stepping into the spaces others overlooked. On a gray Saturday afternoon in Manhattan, he chose to walk into the most prestigious property in his portfolio, not as a CEO in a tailored suit, but as an ordinary traveler with a worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and a simple carry-on bag. The building itself towered over the busy street like a monument to luxury. The Crown Imperial Hotel was not just any hotel. It was the jewel of Walker Hospitality Group, a skyscraper that glittered with marble floors, golden chandeliers, and bellhops who moved with rehearsed precision. Guests paid thousands of dollars a night to breathe in its exclusivity. Anthony paused before the glass doors, his reflection staring back at him. For a moment, he wondered if his casual attire would shield him well enough. He had done this before in other properties, testing how his staff treated guests who didn't fit the expected profile. But today, something in his chest felt heavier. He stepped inside. The lobby hummed with quiet wealth. A string quartet played near the bar. Guests in pressed suits and silk dresses sipped champagne while waiting for check-in. The smell of polished wood and expensive perfume lingered in the air. Anthony approached the front desk. Behind the polished marble counter stood Linda Perez, a young receptionist with sharp eyes and a practiced smile that vanished the moment she looked him over. Her glance skimmed his jacket, his shoes, his skin. Her lips tightened. "Good afternoon," Anthony said softly, placing his driver's license and a black titanium credit card on the counter. "Reservation under Walker. Presidential suite." Linda barely touched the card. She lifted her brows. "Presidential suite. Sir, are you sure you have the right hotel?" A few guests nearby glanced in their direction. Anthony's jaw flexed, but he kept his tone calm. "Yes. I booked it 3 weeks ago." She slid his card across the counter with just 2 fingers, as if it carried a stain. "I'll need to verify this." Anthony waited in silence. He had mastered silence. Years of boardrooms, negotiations, and public scrutiny had taught him that silence often spoke louder than protest. Yet as he stood there, he felt the old, familiar sting of being judged before a word was spoken. Linda tapped at her keyboard, then frowned. I don't see a Walker in the system. Are you sure this isn't some kind of mistake?" Anthony leaned forward slightly. "Please check again." At that moment, Richard Doyle, the hotel's general manager, appeared from a side office. Tall, silver-haired, and dressed in a perfectly pressed navy suit, Richard carried himself with the arrogance of a man who believed the property belonged to him He gave Anthony one sweeping look and immediately walked behind the desk. "What's the issue?" Linda Richard asked. "This gentleman claims he has the presidential suite," Linda replied, her voice loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "But his card seems questionable." Anthony's eyes narrowed. "Questionable." Richard picked up the credit card, turning it over as if examining counterfeit money. He chuckled under his breath. "We've seen cards like this before. Scammers print them online. Sir, I think you should save us all some time." The words cut deep, sharper than any blade. Around them, murmurs began to spread. A young couple at the bar pulled out their phones. A businessman whispered to his wife. Anthony could feel the eyes, the assumptions, the silent verdicts forming. He inhaled slowly. "Run the card," he said. Richard crossed his arms. "We won't be doing that. Security will need to escort you out if you can't provide a valid form of payment." Anthony tilted his head, studying the man. Inside, his chest tightened. He remembered a night long ago when his father, a hard-working mechanic, had been turned away from a hotel in Atlanta after driving 10 hours for a wedding. "Not your kind of place," the desk clerk had said. That humiliation had lived in Anthony's memory like an open wound. Now here he stood, decades later, owner of this hotel chain, facing the same venom through different mouths. The lobby grew quieter. More phones lifted into the air, recording. Anthony's voice, steady but firm, broke the silence. "I have a reservation. I have identification. I have a credit card. You're refusing me service based on what? Exactly." Richard smirked. "Based on experience. People like you don't usually book our presidential suite. It's $2,800 a night. And frankly, you don't look the part." Gas rippled through the guests. A woman near the elevator whispered, "Did he just say that out loud?" Anthony felt his heartbeat pound against his ribs, but his face remained composed. He studied Richard for a long moment, then spoke softly, almost too softly for the man to hear. "Are you sure you want to finish this sentence?" Richard scoffed. "I don't need to finish anything." Security. 2 guards appeared from the corner, both shifting uneasily as they looked from Richard to Anthony. They weren't sure what to do. The tension in the room felt electric, like a storm about to break. Anthony could sense it too, the shift in the air, the audience gathering, the moment thickening. Inside, doubt whispered, "Should I end this charade now? Reveal who I am?" But another voice, deeper, firmer, replied, "Not yet. Let them show the world who they really are." Across the lobby, Maya Collins, a travel blogger with 500,000 subscribers, lifted her phone higher. She whispered to her friend, "Jason Reed, are you getting this? This could go viral." Jason nodded, the red light of the live stream glowing. Anthony straightened his shoulders. The humiliation was real, raw, and public. Yet his silence, his refusal to shout, was its own form of power. The general manager leaned closer. "Sir, if you don't leave in the next 2 minutes, we will call the police. And then, believe me, your little act will end badly." For the first time, Anthony allowed himself a small smile, not out of joy, but out of recognition. He had seen this scene play out too many times, in too many lives. And now, the clock had begun. 12 minutes. The 2 security guards hesitated, shifting their weight from one foot to the other. Neither wanted to grab Anthony Walker, not in front of so many watching eyes, not with the phones lifted high and recording every breath. Yet Richard Doyle's glare pressed against their backs like a command that could not be disobeyed. Linda Perez leaned closer to Richard and whispered just loud enough for Anthony to hear. "He's probably using a stolen card. These scammers think they're clever." Anthony closed his eyes for a brief second. He could almost hear his mother's voice from years ago. Soft but steady dignity. "Son, even when the world tries to strip it away, you hold on to yours." That memory steadied him now. When he opened his eyes, he noticed movement near the velvet ropes of the lobby. A young concierge, Sofia Martinez, stood there, tablet clutched in her hands. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between Richard, Linda, and Anthony. Finally, she stepped forward. "Mr. Doyle," Sophia said carefully, "I just checked the system. There is a reservation under the name Walker. Presidential Suite. 3 nights. It's right here." She turned her tablet around, showing the digital record. Richard's face flushed. He snatched the tablet, scrolled quickly, then sneered. "Glitch in the system. Probably a fake booking. Delete it." Sophia's eyes widened. "But sir—" "That's enough." "Sophia," Richard snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut the air. "Go back to your station." Anthony watched the exchange quietly. Inside, his anger pressed against his ribs like a rising tide, but he forced it down. This wasn't the moment to reveal his hand. "Not yet," Jason Reed whispered to Maya Collins. "Did you catch that? The young staffer just confirmed his name's in the system?" Maya nodded, her livestream comments exploding across the screen. "This is discrimination? Run the card already. This is crazy." The guard stepped closer. One of them, a tall man with tired eyes, said in a low tone to Anthony, "Sir, please, let's step outside. We don't want this to get ugly." Anthony met his gaze. "What's ugly is what you're about to do." His voice was calm, deliberate. "You're about to escort a paying guest out of a hotel he booked and paid for, because your manager refuses to believe the record in front of his eyes." The guard's jaw tightened. He looked at Richard, then back at Anthony, then lowered his eyes. Orders are orders. The crowd was restless now. Guests were whispering, filming, murmuring words like unbelievable and lawsuit. One elderly man shook his head and muttered, "I lived through this in the 60s. Nothing changes." Richard lifted his chin. "You've wasted enough of our time, sir. You're holding up other guests." He gestured to the line forming behind Anthony. "Please leave before this gets embarrassing." Anthony raised his eyebrows ever so slightly. Embarrassing for whom? For the first time, Linda's composure cracked. She crossed her arms, defensive. "Look, we have standards. The presidential suite is for our most distinguished guests. We can't just let anyone walk in off the street and claim it." Anthony's lips curved into the faintest smile. Anyone off the street. He repeated the phrase in his mind like a bitter echo. He glanced down at his carry-on, scuffed from travel, then back up at Linda. Inside, a battle raged. Part of him wanted to slam his card against the desk, declare ownership, end the charade. But another part, the deeper, quieter part, urged patience. Let them dig the hole deeper. Let the world see the truth without him forcing it. Sophia stood frozen by the concierge desk, torn between duty and conscience. Her hands trembled as she typed furiously on her tablet, trying to capture screenshots of the reservation before it disappeared. She knew Richard well enough to fear he might erase it entirely. Maya's livestream had climbed past 8,000 viewers. Comments scrolled so quickly they blurred. Name and shame these staff. He's so calm. Respect. This is racism 101. Richard motioned again to the guards. Remove him. The taller guard sighed and stepped forward. Anthony didn't move. He looked directly into the camera lenses pointed at him from every angle, as if speaking not to Richard, not to Linda, not even to the guards, but to the thousands already watching through glass screens around the world. "My name is Anthony Walker," he said clearly, "and I have a confirmed reservation at this hotel. I will not be leaving until you acknowledge it." The room stilled. The guard froze mid-step. Richard's face turned crimson. Linda hissed under her breath. Anthony's calmness was disarming, his refusal to raise his voice a weapon sharper than rage. He glanced once more at Sophia, whose eyes silently pleaded, "Please don't give up." Richard broke the silence. "Enough! Call the police!" Gas echoed through the lobby. Phones tilted higher, capturing every word. The tension had reached its peak, every second stretching like an eternity. Anthony folded his hands in front of him. He wasn't moving. He wasn't yielding. Inside, his thoughts spun fast. How much longer should I let this go on? Another minute. 5. What will break them, the police arriving, or the truth finally slamming down like a gavel? He drew a slow breath, steadying the storm inside. The second hand of the lobby clock ticked forward. The stage was set, and Anthony Walker was ready. The lobby of the Crown Imperial seemed to hold its breath. Phones stayed raised, screens glowing, every guest waiting for the next move. Anthony Walker stood in silence, calm but unyielding. His hands rested lightly on the marble counter as if he had all the time in the world. Inside, though, his chest was heavy with a storm he refused to show. The taller guard shifted uneasily. His partner muttered, "Maybe we should double-check." But Richard Doyle cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. I said, "Remove him." Now. Before the guards could move again, Sophia Martinez stepped closer. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. "Mr. Doyle, I have the confirmation right here. I can show everyone if you just Richard spun on her." "Sophia, enough. One more word, and you can pack up your desk." The young concierge froze, her knuckles white around her tablet. Anthony caught her eye. He gave the faintest nod of gratitude. She had tried. "Sir," Linda Perez chimed in, folding her arms tightly, "this charade has gone on long enough. Our guests are getting uncomfortable. If you don't leave voluntarily, the NYPD will be here in 10 minutes. Anthony's gaze moved slowly from Linda to Richard. His voice was low, measured, but carried across the lobby. "I'm asking you one last time. Run the card, or scan the ID in your hand. That's all it takes." Richard barked a laugh that held no humor. "You think we're stupid? You hand me a card that looks too heavy to be real, a reservation that smells like a forgery, and you want us to run it. That's exactly what cons like you count on. But not in my hotel." The words sliced the air, final and arrogant. Anthony felt something shift deep inside. For years he had trained himself to respond with restraint, to keep his temper in check, to preserve dignity even under fire. But this open refusal to even check the truth ignited something different. Jason Reed whispered near the bar. "This guy just admitted he won't verify anything. Maya, your stream's blowing up 20,000 live viewers." Maya Collins' hands shook as she angled her phone closer. The comment feed flew past. "He's got proof. Why won't they check classic racism? Name this hotel. Tag the chain." Anthony inhaled, steadying himself. He thought of his father again, standing in a doorway in Atlanta, hat in hand, being told to leave. He remembered the silent shame on his mother's face that night, the way she tried to comfort her husband while packing their bags. I promised myself I'd change this industry, Anthony thought, but to change it, the world has to see it first. He straightened his shoulders. If you call the police, you'll have to explain why you ignored your own system records. You'll have to explain why you never swiped my card or scanned my ID. Richard leaned in close, his voice a whisper meant to wound. Police don't ask those questions. They see a man causing trouble in a five-star lobby, and they make him disappear. The cruelty in the word stung. Anthony's jaw tightened, but his eyes never left Richard's. "You've made your position clear," he said softly. Sophia's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone the truth, but fear clamped down on her throat. She tapped frantically on her tablet, emailing screenshots of the booking record to herself. The guards shifted again, but still they hesitated. One finally asked, "Mr. Doyle, are you sure about this? He looks serious. What if Richard snapped? Do your job." The taller guard sighed and reached for Anthony's arm. Anthony didn't move. His calmness was unsettling, almost unnerving. Around them, the crowd grew restless. A mother hushed her children. A businessman whispered, "If he sues, they're finished." The older man near the elevator shook his head sadly, whispering, "It's 2025, and we're still here." Anthony allowed the guard's hand to brush his sleeve before speaking again. "Do you understand what you're doing? You're not just removing a guest. You're showing the world exactly how you decide who belongs here and who doesn't." The guard faltered, pulling his hand back. Richard slammed the counter with his palm. "Enough! This is my hotel, and I say who belongs here." The sentence rang out, echoing against the marble walls. Gas rippled through the lobby. Maya's camera caught it all, the sneer, the arrogance, the certainty. Anthony's heart pounded. He thought of his daughter, 13 years old, who loved to travel, but once asked him, "Daddy, why do people look at us funny when we check into hotels?" He had promised her that one day things would be different. That promise burned inside him now like fire. He lowered his voice, speaking almost to himself, but loud enough for every microphone and camera to catch 12 minutes. "That's all it will take." Richard blinked. "What did you say?" Anthony didn't answer. He simply stood taller, hands folded behind his back, as if waiting for something inevitable. Sophia's tablet buzzed. She glanced down and her eyes widened. The reservation record she had just emailed to herself was gone from the system. Erased. Deleted. Richard must have pulled it. But her copy remained in her inbox. She exhaled slowly. She knew then the truth would not stay buried. Maya's live stream passed 35,000 viewers. The comments turned into a roar. "Expose them, don't back down. Anthony, hold your ground." But Anthony remained still, composed, watching Richard with eyes that no longer showed anger, only certainty. Inside, though, his mind was at war. Should I reveal everything now? Should I end this humiliation before it cuts deeper? Another voice inside answered firmly, "Wait. Let them show every inch of who they are. Then the truth will mean more." The second guard leaned toward Richard. "Boss, this doesn't feel right. Maybe we should." Richard snapped. "Do as I say or hand in your badge." The guard stepped back, caught between fear and conscience. The crowd buzzed with tension. Electricity thick in the air. Anthony felt time slowing, stretching. Every second now was a lesson. Every insult, a record. Every refusal, a verdict. And somewhere, just 4 blocks away, His assistant, Daniel Brooks, was waiting for the call that would unleash the truth. Anthony drew another steady breath. He could feel the tide turning, even if the staff before him didn't see it yet. The denial was complete, and soon the reckoning would follow. The lobby of the Crown Imperial had turned into a stage. Every camera phone, every whisper, every held breath became part of the performance. And at the center stood Anthony Walker, unshaken, as if waiting for a curtain to rise. Richard Doyle barked fresh orders into his radio. "Call NYPD. I want this man out in 10 minutes. Linda Perez smirked, arms folded. "This'll be over soon." Anthony lowered his eyes briefly to the black titanium card still lying on the counter. Its surface reflected the crystal lights above. He remembered when the bank first issued it to him years ago. He had slipped it into his wallet quietly, almost embarrassed by what it symbolized. He had grown up in a world where his father could not even get approved for a standard credit line. Now, that very symbol was being mocked as fake. The taller guard muttered to his partner, "I don't like this." Too many people watching. His partner shrugged, looking toward the exit as though planning his escape. Maya Collins whispered to Jason Reed, 38,000 watching live. "This is insane." Jason nodded, angling the phone closer, his voice trembling. This could change everything. Anthony finally moved, slowly, deliberately. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped one number, a single ring, then a voice on speaker. Yes, Anthony. The voice of Daniel Brooks, his executive assistant, filled the lobby, calm, professional, but edged with concern. Anthony spoke clearly. Every syllable meant for both Daniel and the audience of strangers recording. "Daniel, lock the Crown Imperial system. Now." There was silence for 3 seconds. Then Daniel's voice, understood. Executing protocol. Within moments, the hotel's front desk monitors flickered. The reservation system froze. Linda tapped furiously on her keyboard. "What the? The system's down." Richard frowned. "Reboot it." "I can't," Linda stammered. "It's locked. Everything's locked." All around the lobby, employees' radios crackled with confused voices. Housekeeping reported their digital keys failing. The restaurant manager shouted that billing had frozen. Even the elevators beeped and stalled mid-floor. Guests murmured, alarmed. Some cheered quietly, realizing something unusual was unfolding. Anthony's gaze was steady. "Richard, Linda, do you know who I am?" Richard snorted, though sweat prickled his forehead. Some con artist with a hacker friend, Anthony held his phone higher. "Daniel, tell them." On speaker. Daniel's voice was firm. "You're speaking to Anthony Walker, CEO of Walker Hospitality Group, owner of the Crown Imperial and 67 other properties across the country. The system is now under executive lockdown." The room went silent. Phones shook in hands as thousands of livestream viewers erupted in capital letters across Maya's feed. "He's the CEO, OMG twist, justice served." Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Her face drained of color. Richard tried to bluster. "This is ridiculous. You can't just..." Anthony raised one hand, cutting him off. The gesture was quiet, but it carried authority like thunder. "For the last 15 minutes, I've listened to you insult me, call me a fraud, threaten me with police, in my own building." His voice remained low, almost intimate, but every word echoed. "You had every chance to verify the truth, and you chose not to." Guests broke into murmurs. One man clapped softly, then another. A ripple of applause began to spread. Anthony turned his eyes toward Sophia Martinez. "Sophia, thank you. You spoke up when it mattered. I saw your courage." Sophia blinked, relief washing across her face. She clutched her tablet like a lifeline. Richard's hands trembled. This isn't how things are done." Anthony stepped closer, his presence towering, though his voice never rose. "How things are done is exactly why I came here today, to see with my own eyes. And now the world has seen with me," Linda stammered. We didn't know." Anthony's gaze was unwavering. "That's the problem. You never wanted to know." The cameras caught every flicker of emotion on their faces, arrogance melting into fear, certainty collapsing into shame. Maya whispered to Jason, "We just hit 50,000 viewers." The feed scrolled so fast she couldn't read. People were tagging news outlets, demanding coverage. Anthony lifted his phone again. "Daniel, note the time. Effective immediately. Richard Doyle and Linda Perez are suspended from duty. Escort them from the premises." Gas filled the air. Richard sputtered, "You can't fire me like this. I've given 20 years to this hotel." Anthony's reply was soft, almost gentle. "And in 20 seconds, you destroyed it. Loyalty without respect means nothing." Two security guards looked at each other, uncertain. Anthony turned to them. "You were asked to remove me. Now I'm asking you to escort them. Decide where your integrity lies." The taller guard nodded slowly. He stepped toward Richard. The crowd erupted in cheers and gasps. Richard backed away, red-faced. "This isn't over." Anthony met his eyes. "It already is." Linda Perez collapsed into a chair, covering her face with trembling hands. She didn't resist as the second guard gestured for her to stand. Sophia whispered, "Oh my God," barely audible. Anthony looked around the lobby, his voice carrying not just to the people there, but to the invisible thousands watching live. Hospitality begins with respect. If you cannot offer it to every guest, you do not belong in this industry. Applause thundered now, not just polite claps, but raw, cathartic approval. Guests rose from their seats, some whistling, some cheering. The older man by the elevator wiped his eyes. Finally, he muttered. Anthony closed his eyes briefly. The storm inside him eased, but only slightly. He had revealed his hand. But the cost was heavy. He thought of his father again, of promises made. Was this justice, or just another spectacle? Daniel's voice on the phone broke the silence. "Anthony, CNN is already calling. The live stream's gone viral. Do you want me to prepare a statement?" Anthony exhaled slowly. "Not yet. Let them sit with what they just saw." He ended the call, placed his phone on the counter, and looked once more at the stunned staff and applauding guests. His heart was steady. His voice was calm. This is only the beginning. The echo of applause still vibrated in the marble lobby. For a moment, Anthony Walker stood in the center of it all, letting the sound wash over him. It wasn't triumph he felt, but a heavy stillness, like standing in the eye of a storm. Richard Doyle's angry footsteps faded as the guards escorted him toward the exit. Linda Perez followed, shoulders hunched, mascara streaking her cheeks. Neither looked back. Guests leaned aside to film them leaving, their cameras raised like witnesses in a courtroom. Anthony turned slowly, resting his hands on the counter where his credit card still sat. He picked it up, slid it into his wallet, and looked at Sophia Martinez. Her eyes were wide, filled with both fear and awe. "You did the right thing," Anthony said softly. Sophia nodded quickly, pressing her lips together as if she were afraid of saying too much. Anthony reached for his phone again. The crowd hushed instinctively, sensing another twist. He dialed. When Daniel Brooks answered, Anthony spoke calmly, his tone stripped of all emotion. Daniel, effective immediately. Process terminations for Richard Doyle and Linda Perez. Grounds gross misconduct and discriminatory practices. Lock their payroll, deactivate their badges, and begin a compliance audit of every manager trained under Doyle's leadership. Daniel's voice came steady through the speaker. Understood. I'll execute now. HR will be looped in within 5 minutes. The crowd gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. Maya Collins leaned into her live stream, whispering breathlessly. You guys just heard that. He's firing them in real time. Over 70,000 watching. This is history. Jason Reed panned the camera toward Anthony, narrating with a hushed reverence. He's not just making a scene. He's rewriting the rules right in front of us. Anthony ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. His eyes swept the lobby, pausing on guests who had been silently watching, their faces lined with years of smaller humiliations. One middle-aged woman holding her teenage son stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Walker, she said, her voice trembling. Last summer, my family stayed here. They made us wait 3 hours for a room that we had already paid for. Other guests got keys before us. I didn't complain. I thought maybe it was just me. Anthony's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly. It wasn't just you. Another voice rose from the back, an older gentleman in a tailored gray suit, his cane tapping against the marble. I stayed here in January. The front desk clerk told me my card didn't match my profile. I've been traveling for 50 years, and I've never been so humiliated. The lobby buzzed with murmurs. Guests began speaking over one another, recounting small indignities, each story layering onto the next until the air grew heavy with shared recognition. Anthony raised his hand, and the voices quieted. His tone softened, carrying weight not through volume, but through presence. This isn't just about me. It's about every guest who has ever been treated as if they didn't belong. Today is the last day that happens in this building. Applause broke out again, stronger this time, fueled by anger and hope mingled together. Anthony turned to Sophia. You spoke up and you stood your ground. That's leadership. He paused, then lifted his voice so everyone could hear. Effective immediately, Sophia Martinez is promoted to Guest Services Manager of the Crown Imperial. Sophia's eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. Sir, You earned it, Anthony said firmly. Not because you knew who I was, but because you honored who I was as a guest. The crowd erupted in cheers, some clapping, others calling out encouragement. Maya's voice trembled as she whispered into her phone. 85,000 live viewers now. Chat's exploding with heart emojis. Anthony felt the emotion swell in the room, but deep inside, another layer of memory pressed against him. He thought again of his father of the night he came home fired for looking untrustworthy. That wound had never healed, and now, standing here, Anthony realized he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to make sure no son had to watch his father break under the same weight. He turned toward the velvet rope barrier separating the lobby from the waiting area. With a calm authority, he addressed the entire room. If any of you have ever been mistreated here tonight, tomorrow, next month, I want you to tell us. Write it down, record it, speak it. Every story will be heard. Every wrong will be corrected. The words carried like a vow. A guest near the front shouted, Thank you. Others clapped, their voices rising in agreement. Anthony let the noise settle before he spoke again. The Crown Imperial is supposed to be a place of welcome. Tonight, it becomes one again. He stood quietly for a moment, scanning the lobby. Phones pointed toward him. Guests looked at him not just as a CEO, but as a man carrying their dignity. His chest rose with a slow breath. For the first time in years, he felt the shadow of his father's humiliation lift slightly from his shoulders. But beneath the relief was something sharper resolve. What he uncovered tonight was not an isolated incident. The rot ran deeper, and Anthony knew this was only the beginning. The lobby of the Crown Imperial no longer felt like a hotel. It felt like a stage. Dozens of guests leaned forward in their seats, phones lifted, eyes wide. Some whispered quietly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Anthony Walker stood at the center of it all, calm but unyielding, his presence commanding even without raising his voice. Maya Collins whispered into her phone, 90,000 viewers. Hashtag Crown Scandal is trending #1. Jason Reed panned his camera toward the crowd, capturing faces raw with emotion. It was the silence that struck Anthony most. People wanted to speak, but something held them back, the same hesitation he had seen for years. The fear of not being believed. Finally, a young mother stepped forward, her toddler balanced on her hip. Her voice trembled. Last month, I checked in with my daughter. They asked me for my ID 3 times. 3. While the man behind me in line, he got his keys in less than a minute. I thought maybe I was overreacting, but seeing what they did to you, I know now I wasn't. Her words cracked halfway through. She kissed her toddler's forehead, trying to steady herself. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering their own memories. Anthony lowered his voice, gentle but firm. You weren't overreacting. You were disrespected, and that's on us. The woman's eyes glistened, and she whispered, Thank you, before stepping back. Then an older man with silver hair tapped his cane against the floor as he approached. I came here in January, he said, his voice gravelly but steady. They told me my card didn't match my profile. I've been a lawyer for 40 years. I didn't understand what they meant, but I do now. They were saying I didn't look like I belonged in this lobby. The words hit the room like a wave. Several guests gasped. Others muttered angrily. Anthony's jaw tightened. He nodded once, deeply. You did belong. You all did. And tonight proves it. The man placed a trembling hand on Anthony's shoulder. Don't let them bury this, he whispered. Anthony swallowed hard. I won't. One by one. Voices began to rise. A young professional in a navy blazer admitted he had been asked for a second form of ID while others sailed through check-in. A woman in her 60s described being told her booking must have been a mistake because she reserved the executive suite. A college student said security had followed him through the lobby because his sneakers looked suspicious. Each story layered onto the next, the air growing heavier with every word. Phones captured it all. Sophia Martinez stood near the counter, her tablet still glowing with the reservation system. She looked around, tears glistening in her eyes. I've worked here for 4 years, she said suddenly, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry. I've seen this happen again and again. Guests treated like suspects, families embarrassed, and I stayed quiet because I thought it wasn't my place to challenge my boss. The room hushed. Everyone turned toward her. Sophia's voice shook, but she pressed on. Tonight, I couldn't stay quiet, and I won't again. If this hotel is going to stand for something, then let it stand for dignity, for every guest, every time. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya whispered into her mic. 100,000 live viewers. People are calling Sophia a hero. Jason's lens caught the raw emotion on her face as she wiped away tears. Anthony stepped closer to her, his voice warm but steady. Courage is contagious, he said, and you just proved it. As the applause softened, Anthony pulled his phone from his pocket again. His thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment. He thought of his father, of that night decades ago when a job was lost because dignity was denied. He thought of every face in the room now, people reliving the same wound. His chest tightened. He dialed Daniel Brooks. When the line connected, Anthony's tone sharpened. Daniel, I need a full report. Pull every guest complaint from this property for the last 24 months. Cross-reference with Doyle's management directives, and expand it company-wide. Daniel didn't hesitate. Already on it, sir. Early numbers are ugly. Over 60 confirmed cases flagged at this location alone. Anthony closed his eyes briefly, exhaling through his nose. The crowd could sense the weight of what he had just heard, though they didn't know the details. What do you want me to do with the data? Daniel asked. Anthony opened his eyes, his voice low but resolute. Go public. Transparency first. No more quiet fixes. The crowd erupted again, cheers mixing with gasps. Phones tilted higher. Maya whispered breathlessly. Did you hear that he's making it public? This is bigger than one hotel. Jason's voice cracked with adrenaline. Over 110,000 viewers now. Twitter's exploding. Anthony ended the call and looked around the lobby. His voice dropped, intimate, pulling the room closer. This isn't just about tonight. This is about something deeper, a culture that says dignity must be earned. That ends here. That ends now. The silence that followed was electric. Guests leaned forward, phones trembling in their hands. Then, unexpectedly, Linda Perez's voice cracked from near the exit, where she stood frozen. Tears streaked her cheeks. It wasn't just me, she blurted out suddenly. Richard trained us to do it. He told us to screen people who didn't look the part. I didn't. I didn't want to lose my job. Her confession split the air like thunder. Gas ricocheted through the lobby. The guests turned on her, their expressions shifting from sympathy to outrage. Richard Doyle, red-faced and furious, tried to bark back from where the guards held him. That's a lie, but no one believed him anymore. Anthony's face remained unreadable. He let the moment hang, then spoke with measured gravity. Following bad orders doesn't absolve anyone. But tonight, accountability begins, and it starts here. The guards tightened their grip on Richard's arms. Guests murmured louder, some shouting. Shame others clapping at the courage of those who finally spoke the truth. Anthony turned toward the crowd once more, his voice carrying weight like stone. The Crown Imperial failed you, but this failure is not the end. It is the beginning of a reckoning, and you are all witnesses. Phones lifted higher. Hashtags exploded across platforms. And as the guests cheered, Anthony knew the path ahead would be brutal lawsuits, investigations, resistance from those who wanted the old ways to remain. But tonight, in this lobby, something irreversible had begun. Anthony Walker had flipped the script. The lobby had shifted from chaos to something closer to a courtroom. Every voice, every phone, every pair of eyes waited for Anthony Walker's next move. The weight of what had just been confessed hung heavy in the air, pressing on everyone like invisible gravity. Anthony's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Daniel Brooks. He answered on speaker, his tone calm but urgent. "Daniel, talk to me." On the other end, Daniel's voice was steady but tight with tension. "Anthony, I've pulled 2 years of directives from Doyle's management account. It's worse than we thought." He wasn't freelancing. These instructions came from higher up. A ripple of gas passed through the lobby. Maya Collins leaned closer to her phone. "You guys heard that. This wasn't just Doyle." Anthony's hand tightened around the phone. "How high up are we talking?" There was a pause. Daniel exhaled. "Regional Vice President Harold Jenkins." He sent coded language and weekly memos phrases like "protect the brand image" and "maintain guest profile standards." When you decode the reports, it means targeting guests based on how they look, how they dress, and too often, the color of their skin. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Phones swung toward each other as guests recorded not just the moment, but their reaction. Shocked faces, clenched jaws, wide eyes. Anthony lowered his gaze, fighting the wave of heat rising in his chest. So it wasn't just Richard. The rot runs deeper. He closed his eyes for a second, hearing his father's voice in his memory. "Son, the hardest truth is the bias wears a suit and tie. It sits in boardrooms, not just front desks." Anthony's jaw tightened. He lifted the phone closer to his mouth. "Daniel, archive everything. And don't just send it to me. Push it to our entire executive board, every major shareholder, and the Department of Justice." Gas rippled again. Jason Reed whispered hoarsely, "He's going federal." Daniel's tone sharpened. "Done. Files are already transferring. Anthony, this is going to blow the industry open." Anthony ended the call and set the phone on the counter. He turned slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. "You've heard it yourselves. This isn't the mistake of one manager. It is a system. And that system decided who belonged and who didn't, not based on merit, but on prejudice." Silence followed, thick, heavy. Guests looked at one another, their faces filled with recognition of a truth they had always suspected, but rarely heard named aloud. Sophia Martinez, standing behind the counter, whispered, "My God, it was policy." Anthony's eyes met hers. "Yes, and policy must be broken before people can heal," Maya Collins whispered into her live stream, her voice shaking with the gravity of the moment. 120,000 live viewers. People are saying this feels like history, like a turning point. Anthony let the words linger before he spoke again. His tone was steady, almost soft, but it carried through the lobby like a commandment. Bias hides behind polite phrases, behind rules that sound neutral. But when those rules humiliate mothers, deny children, and strip elders of dignity, they are not rules. They are chains. The room seemed to breathe as one, a low murmur building. A woman near the back whispered, "That's exactly what it felt like. Chains." Anthony straightened, shoulders squared. Tonight, those chains break. Not just here, not just now, but across every property we own. Applause burst forth, spontaneous and raw. Some guests stood, clapping with hands raised high. Others wiped tears from their cheeks. Richard Doyle, still flanked by guards, spat angrily, "You'll ruin everything. Do you know what happens when you expose this lawsuits? Investors fleeing. The brand collapsing." Anthony's gaze cut toward him like steel. "The only thing collapsing tonight is the lie you built your career on." The guards pulled Richard back as the crowd cheered louder. Anthony's phone buzzed again this time. A message notification. He glanced down. Daniel had forwarded the first wave of shareholder responses, some furious, some supportive. One message from a board member read simply, "About time." Anthony closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the sound of applause wash over him. Inside, though, his thoughts turned dark. He had just lit a fire that would consume boardrooms, courtrooms, and headlines. He knew what was coming: lawsuits, smear campaigns, attempts to paint him as unstable. And yet, he felt lighter than he had in years. He looked back to the crowd. This will not be easy. Change never is. But I promise you, the Crown Imperial will never again be a place where dignity is optional. Not while my name is on it. The words landed like stone tablets. Phones caught every syllable, broadcasting to tens of thousands of viewers who would replay it, quote it, debate it. Sophia stepped closer, her voice quiet but resolute. "Mr. Walker, you're not just fixing a hotel, you're fixing us." Anthony's throat tightened. He gave a small nod. "Then let's do it together." Applause rose again, rolling through the lobby like thunder. Guests cheered, some chanting his name softly. For the first time that night, Anthony allowed a faint smile to flicker across his face. Not triumph, resolve, because tonight, the reckoning had begun, and tomorrow, the battle would widen. For a long moment, the lobby simply breathed. The applause dimmed to a low rustle. Phones kept recording, but the frenzy softened into a quiet, focused attention. People were no longer watching a spectacle. They were watching a decision. Anthony Walker lifted his phone again and called Daniel Brooks. He did not pace. He did not raise his voice. He spoke like a man who had rehearsed a promise for years. "Daniel," he said, "we announce reforms tonight." "I'm ready," Daniel replied. "Say the word." Anthony faced the room. "Everyone, please listen. If you're filming, keep filming. If you've been silent before, I invite you to listen now, because this part matters most." The lobby fell still. Even the string quartet at the bar set their instruments down. "Effective immediately," Anthony said. "Walker Hospitality Group is launching a company-wide reform plan. Not a memo, not a press line. A plan with deadlines, budgets, and names attached." He let that breathe. Then he counted on his fingers. First, a full audit of guest interactions across every one of our properties for the last 24 months. We will analyze complaints, refund patterns, upgrade denials, ID checks, security calls, every data point that might hide bias. Second, mandatory anti-bias and dignity training. 60 hours minimum for every customer-facing employee, from front desk to executive leadership. No exceptions. Your bonus will depend on completion and on outcomes, not attendance. Third, transparency. Starting next week, we publish quarterly dignity reports, complaints received, actions taken, outcomes delivered, public, on our website, not behind a login. Fourth, technology. We will pilot an AI-assisted review tool that flags patterns in guest treatment, double ID checks, delayed check-ins, and selective security calls. AI won't replace people. It will make our people accountable. Fifth, a guest dignity hotline staffed by humans, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you are mistreated, you call. You get a case number. You receive a follow-up within 48 hours. No more complaints disappearing into silence. Sixth, an independent dignity council. It will include former guests, civil rights advocates, accessibility experts, and frontline employees. Nothing goes live without their review. Seventh, scholarships, $10 million over 5 years for students from underrepresented communities who want careers in hospitality. We cannot fix a culture unless we change who holds the keys. He stopped there and looked around the room. Some people had brought their hands to their mouths. A few cried openly. Others recorded in silence, eyes shining. The older man with the cane nodded slowly. "This is how you fix a house," he said, almost to himself. "You don't paint over the mold. You tear out the wall." Anthony heard him and swallowed. He had wanted these words for years. He had wanted to say them without fury, without apology, and to mean them. Maya Collins whispered into her phone, 130,000 viewers. People are asking for the name of the hotline. They're ready to call. Anthony turned his phone so the mic could catch Daniel's voice. "Daniel, read it out." Daniel spoke clearly. "Dignity line, 1-800-55. Walk. Live at 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Website module goes live at the same time. Dignity. Walker.com." "Thank you," Anthony said. He lowered the phone, but kept it in his hand, like a shared mic between him and the room. There will be pushback. There always is. Some managers will say the world is too sensitive. Some lawyers will say we said too much. Some investors will want this to pass. He exhaled. It will not pass. A murmur of approval moved through the lobby. Anthony turned to Sophia Martinez. "Sophia, once again, thank you. Tonight you spoke truth to power, and you kept receipts." He glanced at her tablet. "I want you to help design the guest dignity walkthrough for this property. You know the seams. You know where warmth should live. Start Monday. You'll have whatever resources you ask for." Sophia pressed a hand to her chest. "I won't waste it," she said, voice thin but steady. "I won't." Anthony nodded. "Good. Bring frontline staff into the room. The people who stand at the desk know where the cracks are." He felt the weight of the crowd again, expectation and hope braided together. Something tightened in his chest. He could feel his father's shadow, and with it, the question that had sat behind every decision in his life. "Are you building something that will outlive your anger?" He turned back to the guests. "Some of you are wondering if this is theater," he said softly. "If this is a show for the cameras, I understand that doubt. I carry it too. So here is what I offer." He lifted his phone and hit speaker again. "Daniel, calendar." Daniel read from his screen. "Press conference tomorrow. 11 a.m. on the steps of the Crown Imperial. Invite list local and national media. Live stream on all channels. Agenda publish audit scope. Publish council charter. Publish training framework. Publish hotline metrics. Q&A. No pre-screened questions." A small wave of laughter moved through the crowd, the kind of laughter that means relief. Anthony allowed a brief smile. "Daniel," he said, "send invites to the board. Tell them this is not optional, and send the same invite to Harold Jenkins." The lobby stirred. Even the guards looked up. Anthony's voice did not harden, but it did cool. "Mr. Jenkins authored the memos that trained our people to doubt first and welcome later. He can explain himself in the sunlight, or he can resign before lunch, but he will not hide in the hallway." Jason Reed swallowed, voice breaking as he narrated to the live stream. "You heard that? He's calling out the regional VP by name." A woman near the back raised her hand like a student. "What about refunds?" she asked. "What about the people who are hurt already?" Anthony faced her. "We will make it right. If you were overcharged, you will be refunded. If you were denied service, you will be compensated. If you were humiliated, we will call you, not with a script, but with a plan. And if an apology is all we can offer, we will make it the kind that changes something the next day." The woman nodded, tears bright. Anthony's phone buzzed another message from Daniel. CNN, NYT, and 2 networks confirmed for tomorrow. Daniel said, "Shareholders are split but watching. One note from legal: expect class action filings within the week." Anthony's answer was simple. "We won't fight the people we failed." He looked out over the lobby again. "If you file a claim, we will treat you with respect. If you bring a lawyer, we will meet you with information, not delay. I'm not interested in winning cases. I'm interested in winning back trust." Silence. Then a long, sustained applause. Not wild, not chaotic. Steady, like a pledge. Anthony turned to the security guards who had minutes earlier been told to remove him. He met the taller guard's eyes. "Thank you for your restraint," he said. "Report anything you've been told that contradicts dignity. You'll be protected." The guard nodded, eyes wet. "Yes, sir." Anthony felt the night pressing in, heavy but clean, like air after rain. He glanced at the chandelier, at the marble, at the polished brass that had seen too many quiet injuries. He put a hand on the counter, then lifted it again, as if blessing a place he was finally ready to claim. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin again." The night pressed deeper against the tall glass windows of the Crown Imperial, but the lobby still glowed with a strange intensity. Guests lingered, the hours had passed. No one wanted to leave. The marble floor, the velvet chairs, even the brass fixtures seemed to hum with anticipation. Anthony Walker remained steady in the center of the room, though inside, fatigue weighed on him like sandbags. He had carried storms before, but this storm carried thousands of voices along with it. His phone buzzed. Daniel Brooks again. Anthony answered on speaker. "Anthony," Daniel said quickly. "Harold Jenkins is here. He drove in from the regional office. He's demanding a meeting. He brought 2 corporate lawyers with him." The crowd murmured, phones tilted higher. Anthony closed his eyes briefly. He had expected this, but not so soon. "Bring him," he said. The glass doors at the entrance opened. Harold Jenkins strode in, flanked by 2 men in gray suits. He was tall, polished, his tie knotted with precision. His face carried the smooth smile of a man who believed charm could diffuse anything. The applause that had filled the lobby earlier fell into silence. Only the shuffle of shoes and the click of phone cameras remained. "Anthony," Harold began smoothly, his voice projecting like a practiced politician's. "What is happening here is regrettable. I wish you had come to me privately. We could have resolved this without turning it into a circus." Anthony studied him, silent for a long moment. Then he asked, "Privately, like your memos. Hidden in codes only your managers understood. Privately is how the harm grew." Harold's smile flickered. "You're misunderstanding those directives. They were about protecting the brand. High standards, consistent service. You know how critical image is in this business." Anthony stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. Image without dignity is rotten marble. And tonight, everyone here has seen the mold behind your paint. The crowd stirred. A woman whispered loudly, "That's right." Harold adjusted his cufflinks, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Anthony, you've built an empire on discipline. You know what it takes. Not everyone is a fit for every property. We had to filter. If a few people were inconvenienced, that's regrettable, but it kept the rest of the clientele satisfied." Gas rippled across the lobby. Phones shook as guests tried to capture every word. Anthony's chest tightened. He thought of his daughter again, asking why people looked at them strangely when they traveled. He thought of his father, shoulders bent after losing his job. He thought of every story that had been told tonight. "You didn't inconvenience people," Anthony said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "You humiliated them. You trained staff to see some guests as less than others. You wrote policies that punished dignity and rewarded prejudice." Maya Collins whispered into her phone. 140,000 live viewers. He's facing him down. Harold's smile collapsed. He looked at the lawyers beside him, but they stayed silent, sensing the weight of the room. Anthony continued, "Hospitality is not a filter. It is a door. And you've been closing that door for years." Harold raised his voice, anger slipping through his polished tone. "You're destroying shareholder value with this spectacle. Do you know what lawsuits will cost us? Do you know what regulators will demand? You're risking everything." Anthony's reply was simple. "Then let it burn. If the price of protecting dignity is the empire, I will pay it." The words hit the lobby like a strike of lightning. Applause exploded, raw and thunderous. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, cheering. Jason Reed's camera shook as he whispered, "This is history. This is the moment." Harold's face reddened. "You'll regret this," he spat. Anthony's eyes didn't waver. "The only regret I carry is that it took me this long." He turned slightly, lifting his phone. "Daniel, document this moment. Effective immediately. Harold Jenkins is suspended from duty pending investigation by both our board and federal regulators. Deactivate his access. Escort him and his counsel out." The lawyers stiffened, realizing their client had just been stripped of power in front of 100 witnesses and tens of thousands online. Harold sputtered, "You can't." But Daniel's voice cut through on speaker. "Access revoked. Emails archived. Badge deactivated." The taller security guard stepped forward, hesitant but firm. "Sir," he said to Harold, "please come with us." The lobby erupted again, not with chaos but with cathartic cheers. Some guests wept openly. Others hugged strangers. Harold glared at Anthony, venom in his eyes. "You think you've won the board, we'll tear you apart. The press will turn. You'll be the villain before the week is out." Anthony's reply was almost a whisper, but every mic caught it. "If defending dignity makes me the villain, then let history call me that. I'll wear it with pride." The crowd roared. The applause shook the chandeliers. Mia's live stream shot past 150,000 live viewers. Harold's shoulders slumped. The guards led him toward the exit. His polished shoes echoed against marble, a sound that felt like the last notes of a dying song. Anthony remained still, his breath steady, his heart pounding. Inside, he knew Harold wasn't wrong. The fight ahead would be brutal. The lawsuits, the headlines, the shareholders. But in this lobby, at this moment, something irreversible had been claimed. Not victory, not yet, but truth. Anthony closed his eyes briefly, whispering in his heart the words he could almost hear his father say, "You stood. That's all I ever wanted." He opened his eyes again. The crowd was still cheering, and Anthony Walker knew the hardest part had only just begun. The echoes of applause still lingered long after Harold Jenkins had been escorted out. The Crown Imperial lobby felt transformed, as if the marble and brass themselves had absorbed the night's electricity. Strangers embraced. Guests wiped tears from their cheeks. And through it all, Anthony Walker stood quietly, his hands resting on the counter as if grounding himself to the place he had just reclaimed. His phone buzzed again. Daniel Brooks' voice filled the lobby. "Anthony, it's done. Harold's access is revoked, and the system has already logged his suspension. News networks are calling this the most significant corporate shakeup in hospitality in decades. Social media numbers are still climbing. Over 170,000 live viewers now." The guests clapped again, a smaller ripple this time, but no less powerful. Anthony nodded once, acknowledging them, then looked around the room. His voice was softer now, less commanding, more intimate. Tonight wasn't about firing people. It was about freeing people from silence, from shame, from believing they didn't belong here. That ends tonight. A young man in a college sweatshirt raised his hand hesitantly. "Mr. Walker," he said, his voice wavering. "I was followed by security when I stayed here 2 months ago. They said it was random, but it wasn't. I almost never travel anymore because of it." Anthony's heart clenched. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so it carried warmth. "I'm sorry that happened to you. No one should fear being treated like a suspect when they've done nothing wrong. You belong here. Always." The young man nodded quickly, his eyes glassy with tears. Sophia Martinez took a small step forward, her voice steady now. "Mr. Walker, what happens tomorrow?" After the cameras go away, Anthony's eyes met hers. He paused, then turned so he could address everyone at once. "Tomorrow, we build, and not in secret boardrooms or behind locked doors. Tomorrow, the press will stand on the steps of this hotel. Our shareholders will sit beside former guests. Our staff will face questions directly. Every reform I promised tonight will be on the record, and you will hold us accountable." The crowd stirred, whispers rippling. The older man with the cane spoke up, his voice trembling with age, but burning with conviction. "That's the first time I've ever heard a CEO invite accountability. God bless you, son." Anthony's throat tightened. He nodded with gratitude, then inhaled deeply. He thought of his daughter, how she would read about this night in the morning news, how she might finally see her father, not just as a businessman, but as someone who kept a promise to her. He thought of his father, long gone, but whose shadow had guided every step of this evening. "Change," Anthony said, his voice thick with emotion, "does not come because leaders decide it's convenient. Change comes because people demand it. Tonight, you demanded it, and I listened." The lobby filled with applause again. Not thunderous this time, but steady and enduring, like a hymn. Maya Collins whispered into her phone, her voice breaking. 180,000 live viewers. This is going to be on every front page by sunrise. Jason Reed's camera caught the scene, the crowd, the applause, Anthony's still figure at the center. Anthony reached for his phone again. "Daniel," he said softly, "schedule meetings with the DOJ and civil rights organizations. Invite them to shape this reform, and release the first dignity report within 48 hours. Already in motion," Daniel replied. "You should know the board is split. Some are furious. Others are calling this the only path forward. You'll face a fight." Anthony's voice didn't waver. "Then let them fight. But they will fight in daylight." The guests cheered again. As the night edged toward morning, staff began closing down sections of the lobby. Yet no one wanted to leave. Something sacred had been born here, and people lingered as if reluctant to let it end. Anthony finally stepped back, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. He gestured gently to the crowd. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for speaking. Tonight, you carried more courage than most boardrooms I've ever sat in. Go home knowing this: the Crown Imperial will not be the same tomorrow. and neither will I." The crowd applauded one last time, then slowly began to disperse. Some guests shook his hand. Others simply touched his shoulder as they passed. A mother whispered, "You gave my son hope." An older woman said, "I'll tell my church what you did tonight." When the last guest left and the lobby was finally quiet, Anthony sank into one of the velvet chairs. For the first time all night, he allowed himself to close his eyes. He felt the weight of every decision, every confrontation, every promise. He knew the hardest battles were still ahead, but he also knew something had shifted in the marrow of the world. Sophia lingered nearby, hesitant. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, "are you all right?" Anthony opened his eyes and gave her a tired but genuine smile. "I'm alive, and that's more than I can say for the silence we broke tonight." She nodded, her own eyes shining. "Thank you for believing in me." "You earned that belief," Anthony said. "Now help me make it real." Sophia straightened, her posture firm. "I will." Anthony rose slowly, his body aching, but his spirit strangely light. He looked around the lobby one last time. The chandeliers, the marble, the grand staircase. This building had been a fortress of exclusion. Tonight, it had become a temple of truth. As he walked toward the elevator, he thought of his father again. He whispered softly, "We did it. Dad." We stood. The doors closed behind him. Outside, the first streaks of dawn touched the New York skyline. And across the world, headlines prepared to write the story of a night when a hotel became a battleground. And dignity won. Anthony Walker's story reminds us of something timeless. Dignity is not a privilege, it's a right. Many of us, especially as we grow older, have lived moments of quiet humiliation, being overlooked at a store counter, being doubted when asking a fair question, being treated as if our presence required justification. These wounds linger, but so does the power to choose how we respond. Anthony could have walked away that night, angry but silent. Instead, he stood calm, steady, and firm. He turned humiliation into accountability and shame into change, not only for himself, but for thousands of guests who would come after. The lesson for us is clear. We cannot control every act of prejudice or disrespect, but we can control how we meet it, with composure, with truth, with the conviction that every human being deserves to be treated with respect. In our daily lives, whether with neighbors, colleagues, or strangers, we carry the chance to create small revolutions of dignity. Sometimes standing firm in quiet courage is enough to spark change far greater than ourselves. And perhaps, like Anthony, we leave behind a legacy that heals not just our own wounds, but those of others too. Thank you for watching and for sharing this moment with us. If Anthony's story moved you, please take a second to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on dignity, justice, and hope. Your support helps keep these stories alive.